The advice is from lots of research I've been doing. I'm also trained as a health coach, and so I have a real interest and passion for good food, feeding our bodies well, but also dispelling some of the myths that may be out there. Because there is a wealth of information which can be quite tricky to navigate. So I'd like to start by talking about some good food and some things that our bodies really need. So thinking about protein. And then as we go through, we'll talk about specific diets you may or may not have heard of. And if you've got any questions at any point, please feel free to pop them in the chat or just unmute yourselves and ask away. So proteins are so essential to our bodies. We need them for the building blocks of everything, and they play a vital role in every function we have. We've got protein in our bone, our muscle, hair, skin, every tissue in the body, including our brains. Roughly 40% of protein is found in our skeletal muscle, 25% in your vital organs, and the rest is in our blood and skin. All the proteins have a very specific job to do. So, for example, hemoglobin, which from blood tests you may well be very familiar with, has a job of carrying red blood cells, which has the job of carrying oxygen all around our body. So really important. If your hemoglobin's low, you really do know about it. You struggle to regulate your temperature, you can feel breathless, you feel even more exhausted, if you can imagine, than you do already. And it's a specific protein, heme, that's responsible for doing its job for hemoglobin. You may have heard of amino acids. Some can be made by the body, but there are some really important ones, the essential amino acids, which can only be got through food. Animal sources and a few plant sources can provide all essential amino acids that you need. If you're vegan or vegetarian, you can absolutely still get them, but you just have to work a bit harder to make sure that you're getting everything that you need. So you need to really think about including some of the additional sources of these. And sometimes a supplement then can be a good idea as well. So fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds are all missing one or more of the essential amino acids. And what that means is they're still great for you, but you need to think about how you can combine them. So if we think about how much protein is in our different sources, think about fish, because that's the best one for lots of reasons. And a tin of tuna, 23.5 grams, pretty good. All of these are really high mackerel, salmon, cod, all thinking about grilling them. Seafood's good too. I mean, crab sticks came on there and came quite high, and I've included it because it's something that you can grab. I think you have to be a bit careful with crab sticks about whether they could be a bit processed. So I put it on there because it's a good source, but I'm not too sure about it myself. So then we think about other sources. Milk, dairy. Dairy is a controversial one, which we'll talk about separately. I think everything should be included in a good diet, but when we're thinking about protein, half fat cheddar cheese, pretty high in protein. Greek yogurt, 9 grams of protein. That's good. Red lentils, chickpeas, these are great things as well. Brown bread specifically, white bread doesn't actually have a huge amount in, good or otherwise, for us. Quinoa, buckwheat. My favorite go-to snacks, if you're able to have nuts, are almonds, because they've got a huge amount of protein in. They've obviously got great other qualities as well, but a handful of those does make you feel like you've had quite a good snack, and it's packed with protein. So if you were to have a snack with some pieces of apple and some almonds, just a handful of almonds, hopefully you'd feel pretty good from that. So complete proteins. So examples tend to be animal products, but they're not limited to these. So milk, yogurt, cheese, eggs, fish, meat, and poultry. They're all complete proteins. But you can also have chia and hemp seeds, quinoa, buckwheat, and soy protein. So chia and hemp seeds are easy just to sprinkle on lots of different things. Quinoa is very readily available, buckwheat. So they're good sources, but you could put them on your breakfast, then you know you've started your day really well. I think a protein-packed breakfast really sets you off well, especially if you're taking lots of medication, which you might be, and also to try and control some of those cravings that can come with the use of things like steroids. Incomplete proteins, so these are ones that don't have all of your essential amino acids. So if you were to combine them with other things, then you could then mean that you've got all your essential amino acids from them and they can draw them out of each other and you're getting what you need then. So for example, legumes have plenty of lysine, but they're low on methionine. So if you were to eat your vegetable legumes with some grains, that would solve that problem and the combination would be brilliant. I've been doing quite a lot of research into different diets and different types of tumours as well, just to see what was out there and what information people might see. And cooked tomatoes are a really good source of lycopene, and not necessarily in brain tumour specifically, but in health, there's lots and lots of benefits. If somebody's just feeling a bit under the weather, actually, so whipping up a quick tomato soup from cooked tomatoes is brilliant. I've got lots of recipes, so if anybody is interested, I can share those with you afterwards. For some simple, non-fussy, you're not spending hours in the kitchen, but you feel good options. What are novel proteins? Again, I've included this just because they have been manufactured to provide a non-animal source of protein. So this includes things like corn, and something called TVP, which is textured vegetable protein. They are manufactured. I think that's what's important to remember. So they're made through a production process. And so it's just important to remember that that's the case. So be a bit mindful because you may well be having them because they're a good option, but they might not be actually as healthy as they sort of seem. So it's just being mindful about what you're getting, that's all. So dietary models, all have in common that they're natural sources and reject processed foods. When you look at all the diets across the board, and I'll talk specifically about ones that hopefully are the ones that you've mainly come across. If there are extra ones I don't talk about, please do tell me because I've read quite a lot and I will definitely read up about it. So rejecting processed foods is important. We know that processed foods for adults and children don't give us what we need, tend to be high in saturated fats, and actually don't often keep us full for long either. If you're thinking about a diet, for me, the word diet often connotates visions of restriction, self-restraint, possibly a bit of misery, guilt when you eat the wrong thing. We'll talk about diet clubs under lots of different names, and they often impose words like sins with food. Food should be enjoyable, it should be restorative, it should make you feel good. And the origin of the word means to live one's life. It's from a Greek word. And so it's our fuel, isn't it? It's our source of being. We all have a different idea of what a healthy, balanced diet looks like. And at different times, we'll adapt that as well to meet our needs. So whatever you do, whatever you choose to have should feel safe. You should feel comfortable within it. It should not be imposed upon you. You should be able to enjoy it in portions of a sensible size, and it should look balanced. So general rules. So we need to calorie count. So that was always thought to be the way to have a balanced diet. Calories are not the way forward. It's quite an outdated view. We now think more about our metabolic rates and the different types of calories that we might consume. So if you were to put something with a similar amount of calories, you could have something like a soft drink, a fizzy drink, and that's got a fair amount of energy in. And it could be advertised as sugar-free or having saccharin or one of the sugar alternatives. But it doesn't have the same impact energy-wise as a handful of almonds does, because it's sort of empty calories, if you like. So it's not going to give you anything apart from a potential immediate lift of energy and then a crash back down again. So we know that if you're eating calories correctly, it's helping to keep you fuller for longer. So for example, if you were having some Greek yogurt with your breakfast, we know that's quite filling in a really lovely way. And so that would help if you were having that with some berries and a few oats perhaps, and maybe a bit of cinnamon on top. So you're including a spice in there to up your nutritional content. We know that Greek yogurt isn't a bad thing. It's got protein in. It's helping you feel fuller for longer, which means you're less likely to have something that's less good, and you've got nothing that's processed in there. So fats aren't bad. We just need to reframe how we use them. It's things like if you want to have a piece of cake, have a piece of cake. But perhaps you might have some Greek yogurt on the side or something similar, so like some creme fraiche or something like that, a fat or a cream cheese, because although you're adding to the calorie content of that snack or that treat, if we're using the treat sort of words, then it means that it will slow down a sugar release from that cake, and so you won't have the sugar crash afterwards. And so you won't then be looking for something else equally sugary an hour or so after you've had the cake. It will just slowly release it into your bloodstream. And it's not something you're going to eat every day. So if you are choosing to have it, then have it. Just maybe add some Greek yogurt, add some creme fraiche, or add some cream cheese on the side, just to slow down that sugar release. The sugar release is fine, but we know that especially if you're fatigued already, potentially through treatments or medications or just managing everything of life, you may find that if you were to throw in sugar to that and be on this constant wave of going up and down with sugar highs, the same with caffeine, that your body is working so hard to do that it's not then able to do some of the other things that you want to do. So it's really, you need to use your energy wisely, and eating can definitely help from the fatigue side to try and keep you more sort of balanced. Lower calorie diets also tend to be harder to stick to because you're hungry all the time. And what we know is if we were to think about hunger in terms of out of 5, if we reach about 3 out of 5 in terms of hunger level, we start to make less good choices. I'm sure we've all been to the supermarket when we're 4 out of 5, 3.5 even, and come back with a shop that does not represent either if we made a list or what we can do anything useful with that evening because we were just too hungry. So it's harder to stick to. The insulin levels we know are key to weight management. And I mean, sadly now there's even eating disorder which actually surrounds insulin for type 1 diabetics. It tends to be more in the teenage years where they're withholding their insulin because they know they can eat what they want and they'll still lose weight. So we know that insulin levels are important to weight management. We know that sugar and refined carbs promote higher insulin. They also increase inflammation and cause weight gain. Many of you will know from steroids that these are really unpleasant side effects, that the steroids make you crave sugar. You then have the sugar, you're then risk being pre-diabetic because of the effect of the steroid. And the last thing you need is inflammation, because actually the steroid's there to bring it back down again. So trying to balance our blood sugar levels is really important. And again, if anybody's interested in a bit more on that, then I can happily send that. So high insulin levels, what happens is that they cause your blood sugar level to drop. You feel tired, you feel hungry, you feel irritable, hangry, and then naturally you're looking for the fix to feel better, which is generally not something that you would have chosen otherwise. Slimming clubs. So I think we all know somebody who's been to a slimming club, whether we've been ourselves or it's a friend, and they can have really excellent results. The challenge is keeping that weight off because you tend to have to stick to meal plans or their own brands. They do encourage healthy eating patterns, but really within quite a confined space, and they don't allow you to live freely. They do offer a supportive community setting and include some accountability, which for all goal achievements we know is really important. But they're really hard to maintain. So suppose you have to go into hospital, suppose you've got a day at hospital where you've got clinics and all the rest of it. It's just not feasible to be eating in that way, and you're not left with much alternative. So the other downside, and it's one to be careful of, because for some people this is their choice, that a lot of the lower fat versions that they suggest are quite processed, or they heavily load towards one set of foods. So it's just a little bit of, there are some good things with them, but it's a little bit of caution. They also don't really account for any other conditions. So if you're vegan, lots of benefits, we know that. And after diagnosis of a brain tumor, you might feel like it's one of the things, if you weren't before, that you might want to change, or you might want to put some control in. And so cut back on non-organic foods and reduce or cut out meat and fish. That may be a choice. Or vegetarian, so you keep in the dairy side. We know that there's lots of vitamin C and fibre in the foods associated with being vegan. And we know that obviously from an environmental point of view, it's much friendlier. They do allow fat consumption, which is positive, and people who do it tend to stick to it because it's important to them. There's not evidence from a scientific side that this helps as a strict diet from any kind of tumor aspect. It also isn't implicit that foods aren't processed. You can end up having quite a high level of carbohydrate. The diet doesn't sort of limit sugars, so that would be up to the person. And sometimes it's possible to lack certain vitamins because protein is quite restricted. So it doesn't automatically encourage healthy eating patterns. You have to work quite hard. And from an evidence point of view, it's making that choice for the brain tumor side. There isn't really evidence there for it. Mediterranean diet. Now, I mean, this is literally what it says it is. So it's what people in the Mediterranean tend to eat. So the best description is about the macronutrient composition. So it looks at mainly carbs, but good carbs, protein and fat. So mainly from things like olive oil, nuts, seeds, and fish. So the tricky thing with the Mediterranean diet is there's not exactly something to follow. So there's lots of benefits in that, you know, you've got a balanced plate, you get a generous amount of food, and it includes lots of different groups, and a lot of it's delicious. There is some evidence about it improving cognitive health and reducing the risk of inflammation and diabetes because of the omega-3 fatty acids from the fish and the oils. So that's really where that bit comes from. It is practical. The difficulty is understanding exactly what do I have to eat to be on that Mediterranean diet. And sometimes we can think about what we might have had when we were on a holiday. And that's not necessarily what the Mediterranean diet is intending, because sometimes that's lots of pasta and quite heavy with the sauces, not necessarily the best ingredients. But I sort of think about it a bit like the rainbow diet, which we'll talk about, where you're including lots of different beautiful colours of food and veg, and that can only feel good. So the zone diet, I think that this is one that is out there and I've come across. So it's sometimes called the 40-30-30, and it's aiming to balance the hormones, glucagon and insulin, and they're both involved in controlling blood sugar levels. So lots of these different ones come back to trying to control blood sugar levels, which from a brain tumor side, I think does make a lot of sense when you think about the medications that we use and the way that the body metabolizes those. So it allows for the production of anti-inflammatory compounds while suppressing the inflammatory ones. So it's 40% carbs, 30% protein, 30% fat, which is why sometimes it's the zone, sometimes it's the 40-30-30. Low fat protein foods and fresh fruit and veg are included. So it feels like you're getting a good balanced plate. When you look at your plate with this way of eating, you look at 3 sections. So you use your palm for the portions. And so 1 is for protein, 2 is for veg and fruit, and then a tiny dash of fat they include on the side. It's easy to eat out because you can ask for things to be supplemented into a meal or taken, swapped out. So for example, simple things, if it's white rice, ask for wild rice or brown rice or quinoa. If there's potatoes, ask for it to be sweet potatoes rather than white potatoes. There's some quite straightforward things which aren't too fussy, which you could switch in and out with this one. It can be, the people who created it advised that you also took some supplements with it to boost extra vitamins. And so because it's not really including fats, so some of the vitamins won't be absorbed in the way they would if you were having fat in your diet. So it's just being aware that it doesn't completely give you everything that you need, even though it is practical, and it does allow for processed food. The Atkins, I think, has had its day, but was a very popular book. It's sort of seen as the earliest version of keto now, and keto is one which has come much more into prominence. So encouraged high fat, high protein, and very minimal carbohydrate. So the idea was that you deny the body of glucose. This would then use ketones for energy and put the body into a state of ketosis. And the way that that would be checked is by checking it in the urine whether there were ketones in there. There's quite a complicated induction phase. It's expensive because you're really eating a lot of meat. If you remember that, when what people were eating was largely meat-based. It doesn't really account for our whole needs of our bodies. And from a treatment side, does it give you everything you need for your immune system would be a question that you would want to think about if this was something that you were thinking of. It also has some quite unpleasant side effects like bad breath, and made it quite hard to eat out. The upside is people weren't hungry, and some said they had more energy. So thinking on then about the ketogenic diet, that's some of the benefits that people do report from doing this. Ketogenic diet is very expensive. It's also quite restrictive in terms of what you can have. So you really struggle. A lot of people say they struggle to eat out because it's just too hard. And if you don't stay to it strictly, then you leave this sort of state of ketosis. And so then you have to start back again. The reason that people were really interested in it was because it was historically for epilepsy and seizure control was the first sort of interest. It's actually a bit mixed when you look at all of the evidence. And as you may well know yourselves, that it really depends from a epilepsy and seizure control on you personally. What works for one person doesn't necessarily work for the other. So changing your diet can help you. You just have to see whether it works for you. And although there isn't a lot of scientific evidence behind this, if it's something you want to try, you just have to make sure you do it safely. It can cause you to have some GI upset, so constipation, diarrhea, fatigue. So just be mindful if you're feeling fatigued already, that it can add to that a little bit. Intermittent fasting. So be a little bit careful with intermittent fasting. The safest way to do it is probably 16-8, where you fast for 16 hours overnight and then eat for 8 hours of the day. Lots of people do like this and feel that it possibly can increase efficacy of chemotherapy. I've done quite a lot of research to see if I could find evidence for that and haven't managed to. You have to be a bit careful with certain other conditions, including when you're on chemotherapy, as to whether this is helpful for your body during that time. So it may be, if you wanted to do intermittent fasting, you may choose not to do it whilst having treatment or on those treatment weeks. You may choose to go for something a bit more gentle, which most of these diets include fasting for 12 hours overnight. And that's understood to mean that your body can do that repair that it really needs to do, that essential function whilst you're sleeping. It can notice what's going on in itself. If you've got inflammation somewhere, is there some little repair it needs to do? Are your joints swollen and sore? Are your knees achy? Is there anything that the body can try and repair itself whilst it's not digesting? Because otherwise, that's a lot of what it spends its time doing. So the other thing with the intermittent fasting you have to be a little bit careful of is that once you are allowed to eat, make good choices. So preparation is key, because otherwise you do your 16 hours and are so hungry that you dive right into something you wouldn't have chosen otherwise. Superfood, supplement, antioxidants. I thought I'd just touch on these briefly. And where I was really going to focus is on organics. I think that's a bit of a hot topic to know what to do with. And somewhere that, if you were interested in this, that I would point you towards is in the US, they've got a list they produce every year. So it's done by the Department of Agriculture and the Food Association, the FDA. It's called the Dirty Dozen and Clean 15. So if you pop it into any search engine, it comes up with the list. And for 2024, the top of the list were strawberry, spinach, and kale. So that doesn't mean you shouldn't eat them. It just means you may want to choose organic options of those. It's often things that are grown in the ground, and the pesticides cover them because that's how they keep them, that's how they travel, that's how we get them on our shelves all year round. So eating seasonally can reduce, the top spots on this list being in your diet. But on the lower end, it tends to be things you can peel. So it tends to be like carrots, sweet potatoes, things that you can take the rind off. The avocados, they're in the clean 15 because you can take their outer layer off. If you're eating organically, is expensive. And so you may just want to choose certain things that you feel are worth that extra cost if you can manage it. And that tends to be things more in the ground that are more exposed to pesticides. So spinach, strawberries, and kale were the top three, and it might be worth thinking about getting the organic version of those that's had less exposure. Most things have had some exposure, so it's just worth pointing you towards those if you're interested. So I've looked at some various, I think, less popular, but I thought I'd just mention them in case they're anything you've come across. So the Gerson, the alkaline, the macrobiotic. So the alkaline is about balancing your pH in your body. So there's a thought that cancer likes an acidic environment. And they say that through diet, you can then create an alkaline environment. Actually, the researchers have found that your urine might show that you're in an alkaline state, but actually your body isn't influenced by food when it comes to your pH levels. So there's a potential for insufficiency of certain vitamins, and it's not clear cut whether it's worth doing that. Macrobiotics. So lots of these words are everywhere now, aren't they? Microbiotics, macrobiotics. So they avoid certain foods containing toxins. So they exclude any and all processed foods and are predominantly, for some people, exclusively vegan. Some are mainly vegan. Others include, a little bit of protein, animal protein. People do tend to lose weight with a macrobiotic diet, but it doesn't necessarily leave you feeling healthy because you're probably lacking in some of the all-round vitamins. So it's quite it's more akin to the vegan diet. So you just need to be careful to make sure you had everything you needed in there. So dairy, there's lots of stuff about dairy and tumours, isn't there? It's hard to know where you are with it sometimes. I think it's because high-fat dairy products were one of the causes of obesity, and then there was a thought towards having these high-fat dairies and some tumours that relate to obesity. Brain tumours, as we know, does not. And so it was probably due to overconsumption. Dairy is really good for calcium, for protein, for vitamins. You don't necessarily have to have animal dairy. It could be loads of alternative sources now, almond milk, almond products, oat milks. If you are using them, try to make sure they've got some calcium fortified into them and check that they're not too sugary, because some of them do have quite a lot of hidden sugars in. The rainbow diet, I think, is a brilliant one. Look on your plate. Have you got a wide source of colours on there? If you have, brilliant, you're doing a great job. And actually, anti-inflammatory, your bone marrow, your immune system, all of those things will be being boosted because you've got these dark coloured, different veg and fruit on your plate. So it's a very visual thing. You can eat out using the rainbow method. You're just looking at what's in front of you. There's loads of recipes available on Good Food. If you just type in rainbow diet, rainbow recipes, loads of things come up. And seasonally, it's a really easy way to do it too, and tends to be very low, very natural sugars. And dairy is everywhere. It's very much about gut health. I did quite a lot of research into it, and it sounds quite an expensive one to do, in that there's a lot of setup costs. It does give you personalized programs. So from a support point of view, it can be positive from that. And they look at your metabolism's response to certain foods. So then they personalize the program based on that. But the cost is really quite high, and there's no sort of particular evidence from a brain side. But if somebody's looking for weight loss, it seems that this can help, and it can increase energy. Blood sugar balancing, I think, is an excellent way of giving you more energy, balancing your hormones, reducing inflammation. So if you've got joint pain, if steroids or treatment have left you with your knees feeling like they're not your knees anymore, then that can be an excellent source of leveling your body. Excuse me. So on it, every 3 to 4 hours, you have something. You fast for 12 hours overnight, and you include protein with every snack and meal. So you can still have a drink. You can still have, if you're able to, and you can still have pudding. You can do it as a family, so your children can do it. You incorporate spices and additional herbs to boost your count. And if you think that you'd like to try it, I've got a really easy little ebook I could send you with some information on. And if I know, I saw that you said yes about some recipes. But if the blood sugar balancing for anybody is anything they'd like a little bit of information on, then just let me know so I can send it to you. I've done it, and I think it was really simple. It doesn't cost very much money. And it's definitely improved some of my children's lunchbox appearances, and some of their afternoon snacks, although I will say not all. So if anybody would like any information, then please do let me know. Or if anybody has any specific questions, or if anybody would just like a chat about what they're doing, drop me an email, or just let me know in the chat, and then I can email you to arrange a time to have more of a one-on-one chat about it. It is a bit of a minefield, but it is a way of having a little bit of control in a place where we don't necessarily have very much control always. So if it can make a bit of a difference, sometimes that feels nice by itself.